welcome to this 174th episode of Europe Calling. And today we're going live to the 28th World Climate Conference in Dubai. And I will just start with a few announcements. So you already heard we have language subtitles into multiple languages, speaking English today. And then once we have the recording, that will also maybe be language interpreted. We will see. In terms of questions, we have close to 2,000 registrations now. So in order to filter out the most important audience questions, your most important questions, please use the Slido link I just put in the chat. Ask your questions there and upvote the question you like most from other people. And then we have a ranked list, and we do it rather democratically and choose the most important questions. Europe Calling, our webinars are always recorded and put on YouTube and online as a podcast afterwards. So just be aware of that. And especially when you ask questions, if you don't want to mention your real name, just choose any name, because it's so much nicer for me to kind of not, make up a name when I'm asking those questions. It's always nicer to ask a name. And then finally, big thank you to Michael Bloss and his team in Dubai. They were frantically trying to get like all the people together and organizing this. It's been extremely volatile. And this volatility in Dubai now in the negotiations, we will hear more about this today. This is also the reason why the date changed and the guests changed. So I'm myself still not 100% sure who will actually come in now in the next hour and talk about what and what stage. So it's kind of all a big surprise party here. So just bear with us and enjoy this. And no further ado, I will give the floor to Michael Bloss, climate policy spokesperson of the Greens EFA Group in the European Parliament, who is in Dubai, to give us a little intro into that. That will be followed by James Dyke from the University of Exeter, who give us the science perspective on why what's at stake, what's actually needed. And then comes Chiara Martinelli, she will join us later from Climate Action Network. She is directly in the negotiations here and will give us an update. There might be a new text dropping or in the next few minutes, so we might have something very, very, very up to date. And then we see here Ignacio Villaroya from Fridays for Future Argentina. Great to have you. He will have the civil society perspective, and then we'll still have some time for some questions. So sorry for the speed of my introduction, but we don't have much time, and I give over to Michael. Michael.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thanks a lot for the introduction. So I'm here in Dubai in the rooms and facilities of the European Union. We are meeting lots of people here. I'm part of the delegation of the European Parliament. And let me just give you a quick intro on how this works. And it is very superficial because it's very complicated how all of these climate conferences work. So first of all, it's the climate conference. We're in Dubai. It meets every year once. And the idea is that we collectively, globally, work on the progress to limit global heating. The objective is, of course, to 1.5% or well below 1.5 degrees or well below 2 degrees. Basically, every country in the world is a member, and in the end, every country in the world has to say yes. So it's a consensus arrangement. So we really need to get everyone on board, which is very, very difficult. We are at the end of this 2-week conference. Tomorrow at 11 in the morning, it should end. Let's see whether it will really end. So things get a little bit chaotic here. We are waiting since this morning 11 on the final text that should be agreed on. Then it said it would be 12. Then it said it would be Dubai time 3 and 4, and now it's in Dubai 5 o'clock, and it's still not there. So we are all very interested in what is happening. Who else is here? So there's many others here. Altogether, there's around 100,000 participants in this climate conference. So there's people from the NGOs. There is, of course, also the businesses. There are scientists here coming. There's indigenous people. There are kind of parliamentarians, and they all meet, and there's a lot of different kinds of side meetings, but really there are also some some coordinated, organized negotiation tracks on basically almost all aspects of the climate crisis. So that, for instance, one thing is so how to best adapt to the climate crisis and who pays for that. A second question is what we have been discussing here is the loss and damage that is already happening through the climate crisis, and where science is advancing more and more that they can attribute how much of, for instance, flooding, of heat waves is actually caused by the climate crisis, and therefore we can also attribute who is responsible for it, namely those who have been emitting a lot of CO2 emissions. And there, of course, is the mitigation work stream. So that means like we need to really reduce our CO2 emissions. There, just to not make it too complicated, all of these work streams, I mean, they're very difficult. Lots of government officials who are negotiating every comma here. But maybe two things that were interesting, and Chiara Martinelli will fill us in later on in detail on the things that just came into the room. That's great. So first, we thought we'd discuss a lot about money for loss and damage, but actually, at the very beginning of the climate conference, already Germany, other members, France, but also the United Arab Emirates, they pledged to contribute some millions for loss and damage. So that was already a breakthrough at the very beginning. Then there is a second thing that will pop up, which is that the president of this climate conference, who unfortunately is also an oil and gas boss, wants to like make everyone pledge that we will triple renewable energy and double energy efficiency. And then I think the most interesting point and the most fought around point is whether we can finally agree to end fossil fuels. This is very contested. It's COP28. It means since 28 years we are meeting every year, and still there is no consensus that we need to end fossil fuels, so oil, coal, and gas, which is really ridiculous, because it's very clear that we need to do this from a scientific perspective. But maybe we will get something. The European Union has been very strong on this. The small island countries have been very strong on this. But I was discussing today also with the Chinese delegation, with the delegation from South Africa, but also especially the oil-producing countries, so the Arab countries. Russia, also Turkey a little bit, they oppose it, because it means, of course, they will lose their income from selling oil and gas. So this is the most difficult thing that we are fighting around. And as said, there should be a text since this morning 11. It's not there yet. My plea to the European Union is, do not accept a text that is not speaking about the end of fossil fuels. I think we should rather walk away than accepting something that is that will not bring us to fulfill the Paris Agreement. So that's a first maybe impression from here. But yeah, Chiara is also in the room, so looking forward to also answer your questions later. And thanks that you are here. 800 people. That's really amazing.
Thank you very much, Michael. Yeah, considering it's actually midday in Central Europe, so a lot of people actually have to work, but they're rather here in the audience, which is excellent. So I'd like to welcome James Dyke here as our next speaker. James Dyke is one of the framing authors of the Global Tipping Points report. I will put the link in the chat as well, and that's the report that is an, as it says itself, authoritative assessment of risks and opportunities of both positive and negative tipping points, and what that actually means. And well, I asked him before the webinar, what's at stake? Why is like very strong language that Michael was talking about? Why is that important? And that's what we're going to hear from James. James from University of Exeter. Great to have you, and you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak to you, and welcome everybody from around the world, I guess. So last week, the Global Tipping Points report was published. It's the product of over 200 international scientists. It's over 400 pages. And I would argue its main conclusion is that 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming really matters. The idea of dangerous climate change being below 2 degrees Celsius, well, that was established in the famous Paris Agreement of that COP. And it was in Glasgow, COP26 in 2021, that the international community, I would argue, agreed that really below 2 degrees Celsius means 1.5. And that was initially because there was the acknowledgement that beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius, sea level rise alone would probably be an existential risk for some low-lying island nation states, and also many communities that live in low-lying areas. For these places, there just isn't any feasible flood protection scheme or barriers. And so if warming was to pass beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius, then within this century, what you would probably be seeing is a significant displacement of people. But since then, there's been increasing scientific understanding that as we warm the world above 1.5 degrees Celsius since pre-industrial periods, we will become closer to activating what we call climate tipping points. So the changes that we've seen thus far in the climate are relatively progressive. We are seeing increased frequency of storms. We're seeing increased frequency of floods. There's more devastating cyclones and hurricanes, for example. But we now know that if you were to continue warming the Earth's surface as a consequence of us burning fossil fuels, what you're going to do is that extra heat in the climate system is going to produce tipping points. For example, we will see the unavoidable melt of the Greenland ice sheet, and then maybe also the Western Antarctic ice sheet. If you go above 1.5, the probability of these tipping points becoming activated increases. And it's already the case. We cannot rule out the case that there have been unavoidable tipping points activated in the Greenland ice sheet, and then even in sections of the Western Antarctic ice sheet. There's been some research published this year that shows that irrespective of whatever mitigation scenario you want to adopt, even if you have the most optimistic scenario, we do limit warming to no more than 1.5, significant regions of ice in Antarctica are going to melt. There is nothing we can do about this. So that's a classic kind of tipping point. Fortunately, these tipping points should take centuries, if not thousands of years to unfold. Unfortunately, there are a number of other tipping elements or tipping points which could happen much, much faster. So when we're looking at the potential dieback in the Amazon or boreal forests, which could release significant amounts of carbon, if we're looking at the disruption of circulation in the oceans, this could be happening, at least in the upper portions of the Atlantic Ocean, this could be happening within a decade. And that has potentially devastating impacts on global food security, because it's going to be affecting the precipitation, where it's going to rain, periods of drought for significant fractions of the Northern Hemisphere, and also other parts of the world. We also know that tipping points interact. So if the Atlantic tipping element goes, then that increases the chance of a tipping element unfolding in the Amazon. So we end up with this kind of scenario of tipping cascades. So what this means is that 1.5 really matters. And what this means is that from this COP, if we don't see an unambiguous statement that there is going to be a phasing out of fossil fuels in an orderly and a just and equitable way, but in a very rapid way, then I really do think we would have passed the point when you would have to accept that we are not going to limit warming to no more than 1.5. There's already abundant reasons to think that warming is going to significantly exceed 1.5 and 2 degrees Celsius. If you ask most climate scientists, they'll tell you that we're probably heading towards about 3 degrees Celsius by the end of this century. But there has to be an unambiguous phase out. Anything less, you're probably opening the door to not just 1.5 degrees Celsius, but well above 2 degrees.
Excellent, James. Thank you very much for this setting the stage and why this is important. And I already have one question actually from the audience that is basically done for you. This is a question by Dirk Landsberg, who's a top question here. He asks, what role do scientists play at the COP? Are they guidelines, advising, or just an opinion?
So what should happen is, in terms of I suppose the procedure is that the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, tasks the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, to produce these landmark reports, these synthesis reports. So Earlier this year, we saw assessment report number 6, and this is the state of the art. That is then given to policymakers, to the envoys, to the politicians, who then essentially make the societal decisions on what do you do with that knowledge. And so there's a bit of a separation. There's the scientist will tell you how much warming we've had. Scientists will tell you how much warming we will have with a certain amount of carbon if we're going to emit into the atmosphere. And then society is meant to decide about what do we do about that? What do we consider to be dangerous? How are we going to allocate that available carbon budget? So these are obviously not necessarily scientific questions, but the way in which I would understand the role of scientists, and maybe even the Global Tipping Point report that we've published this week, it's informing policymakers, the people who are deciding what we're going to do in terms of phasing out, hopefully, fossil fuels. It gives them the evidential basis to make those decisions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Now we are either going with, and I will actually check with our guests because as I said at the beginning, so it's all very volatile and coming in, coming out. I just heard the new text has just dropped. So I think Chiara's probably still reading it. So the question is, I'm happy to, so Ignacio has to go in 20 minutes. So Chiara, how long do you have? Can I have Ignacio first and then you have 10 minutes more time for reading? Is that good? Good plan. Okay, so you see it's all volatile. So then let me just welcome Ignacio Villaroya from Fridays for Future Argentina, and yeah, great to have you. And what is your view on what's happening in Dubai, and also maybe how is it to be in Dubai as civil society? We all still remember maybe Egypt last year, which was super difficult for civil society. So great to have you and great to hear from you and your views.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Max, so much for having me here today. Yes, as you said, I'm Ignacio from Jóvenes por el Clima. Yes, like Youth for Climate Argentina. This is part of the Fridays for Future network. And well, I'm here in Dubai at a COP because of being part of the civil society. I think it's very important. This is my first COP. I've been in like some spaces that have been similar before, but as COP is my first time here. I'm here because I want to keep pushing for the climate policy in my country. I think it's very important to follow the agenda from each country's perspective. Of course, it's different to be a climate activist and what you push for if you're from Argentina than you're from Germany or from other parts of Europe, for example. What you were talking about the phase out of fossil fuels is a very complex type of discussion. In Argentina, what we're trying to do is to combine the climate agenda with the economic agenda or with the development agenda. Because nowadays, for example, yesterday, just took office a climate denier president in Argentina. That he's not only a climate denier, and although it may seem unbelievable, being a climate denier is the I don't know, the softer part of his campaign and of his ideas, because he has even more dangerous ideas to the country and to the people. So sometimes when you're a climate activist in countries that are not 100% developed, it's hard to talk to people because sometimes they say, okay, yeah, I do believe that climate change is a very important issue to take into account, but I don't think it has to be in top of the agenda because first you should fix, you should fix education, you should fix economy, you should fix labor and a lot of stuff. For example, in Argentina, we have 160% inflation rate per year. And when it comes to groceries, you have like a 300%. Imagine Europe's like after the pandemic when inflation soared up to 9% and people were like upset, people were rioting, people were like they didn't know how to manage the situation. Well, imagine a country with 160%. It's unbelievable. So as climate activists, we'll always try to show that the climate agenda is something that has to go along with the development agenda. In Argentina, we have most of the strategic minerals and the rare earth and like the most important minerals for the energy transition. As you may know, any type of energy, even renewable energy, they are like very consuming when it comes to these minerals, and these minerals are coming from global south countries. So I think the conversation is very complex. It's not only like going from fossil fuels to renewable energies, because renewable energies also have their complexities when it comes to discussion. A lot of indigenous people are protesting in the north of my country because the mining of lithium is very like water intensive, so they don't have enough water for the crops, for the people, for the homes. So and also what happens is that a lot of international mining companies come to Argentina, they extract the raw materials, and they only pay 1.5% of what they earn in taxes. So actually, we're like giving away everything, and a lot of Argentina is like we have like a very, I would say like strong system when it comes to the thing, or I mean not as much as in European countries, but at least we have some. But there are other countries that have none at all. So international mining companies go to those countries for the sake of the energy transition, but actually they're doing worse because the energy transition is already happening. That's what I see. Sorry,
No,
the,
go
I
on.
okay. The energy transition is already happening, but actually the discussion I don't think is the if the energy transition will happen or not, but actually is on how it will be continued just because of the market rules, and it will be led for three main companies like Shell, BP, and all that stuff, or it will be like really thought strategic. Because when we talk about the energy transition, we are not talking about just going from again from fossil fuels to renewable energy. We're talking about a decentralized system. We're talking about um, we're going to talk about like energy for all. For example, the SDG 7 of the SDGs is not green energy. It's like sustainable energy for all. So that's very important. You have like lots of people that for them the energy transition doesn't mean going from fossil fuels to green energy, but it means going from nothing to go from energy. So I think it's very important, and that's why the complexity of, for example, of James was talking about was talking about the negotiations and more. I think it's also one of the roots is that some countries they cannot even think about investing in renewables if they don't have energy at all. So yeah, as a civil society, I think it's very important to keep on pushing for more policies and for these policies to be more to be as I don't know as I would say I with the more interest for the people as possible. But yeah, I think we have to recognize that everything is so complex. Sometimes, if you're from one perspective, it's so difficult to see the other's perspective. In Argentina, happens also that we don't have enough investment because we are in the crisis. So we don't have the amount of possible investment from the country to bring these technologies from abroad to begin with the transition. So I think that's what I want to show that sometime with the civil society, of course, we have to keep on pushing because we're not part of the government. So we have to be the one of dreaming for a better world, and the government should be the ones like thinking how they manage to do so. But I think it's important to recognize that in the world there are a lot of disparities between countries, not only between people, but also between countries. So I think we have to recognize that and work on the basis of that. And again, there's not an important, I mean, there's not a transition if it is not fair. Because for example, I don't think it's important to have all solar panels in every rooftop if all the solar panels are managed by Shell, for example. I think that's not any transition that is fair, and that's not the inner transition that I want. I want one transition to provide with high skilled for the high skilled people, also for people who already are working on, for example, even I would say something. My father works as a truck driver in an oil company. He hasn't finished, for example, high school, so he has not. I mean, it's the only job that he could get. So I want also, for example, for those people to be reskilled, for those people to have the opportunities to keep on going on the transition. So that's my point of view. Thank you.
Ignacio, Thank you so much. And you told me everyone calls you Nacho, so I do that. Nacho, thank you very much for that. It was really, I mean, really, really important point. And I think this, especially this energy for all, it's always quite, it's quite interesting. So in Germany, there's like a huge movement of like this balcony solar panels here. So this is something where, where with the panels now so cheap, there's a lot happening in terms of independency, and and I hope this is maybe also
Can
one
I
of
add
the
something more?
discussions I know. Yeah. Hmm?
Can I add something more?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, it's very important also for people from Europe to pressure the countries to really contribute in the loss and damage funds and all of these mechanisms that are trying to support global South and developing countries. Because sometimes from some spaces that are pressuring developing countries to transition, but actually if we don't have enough funding to do so, you're just leaving people behind. So, for example, it happens in Argentina. We'll tell you something with the European Union Mercosur agreement. Mercosur is like the European Union of South America that has Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, and Brazil. And in this agreement, they have a lot of regulations when it comes to environment, not about energy, but it's more agriculture. Well, Argentina is an agricultural country. Our main exports are beef, soy, and corn and 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 wheat. But what happens that I really support these environmental regulations in the agreement because they're trying to hold the Argentina government accountable for the deforestation that is going on in the north of Argentina, in the jungle of Argentina,
Mhm.
because they're trying to plant more soy. And of course, in our opinion, they don't want any soy or any beef that has had any deforestation process, in South America. But there is something very important that if the opinion or developed countries that are the most, they have the most responsibilities on climate change, if they're not given enough funding and enough support to developing countries for them to get rid of the deforestation, just making the gap between rich and poor in South America even bigger. Because some companies in South America, yes, they can shoulder the transition, but small businesses, factories, farms, they cannot do
Mm,
so. So
mm,
it's very important to keep on pushing this. And yeah, I think it's the European Union or Mercosur agreement is, and we're also we have in Dubai, we have talked about this with the Fridays of Future Germany, and they really got to see our point. And that's I think something very important to keep
yeah.
on talking.
Actually, the Mercosur agreement and many other actually trade agreements are obviously also a very important discussion point here. And for example, from different parties, they have very different and focus on what in terms of climate regulation should be binding in there and enforceable and stuff. And there have been in Germany has been a huge discussion, but in the whole of Europe actually about how to go on with those trade agreements that have been Mercosur has been built in a time where the question about fossil fuel or the end of fossil fuel or the end of industrial farming was not even not thinkable. This is 20 years ago, so we are basically this is one of the big criticisms here that basically this is basically language from 20 years ago. Now we are different language, and language is actually what I want to then connect to Chiara Martinelli. So hi Ricarda Lang, German Green Party spokesperson here, also coming in. But we go first to Chiara Martinelli. She's director of Climate Action Network Europe, and as I said before, so involved in the negotiations, expert on the text, and now Michael also put in the chat. There is a new text. Chiara, great that you're here. Looking forward to what you have to say and your assessment.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Yes. Okay. So please interrupt me if I speak too long, and I'm happy to answer questions because it's a little bit difficult to summarize. So I guess that maybe I want to start building on the intro that Misha made at the beginning. I think it's important to say that we all came here, not only civil society, I would say, many other stakeholders. We all came here with a clear dream to really this COP be the end, representing a concrete step towards the end of fossil fuel era. And we you probably, all of you followed in the last days. There is also this slogan that is very easy to remember, that I would like everyone in this webinar also to remember. We call for a slogan that is always starting with F. So it's very easy to remember. So we call for a fast, fair, forever funded fossil fuel phase out. So I think this is a very easy way to summarize where we stand and what we want from this COP28. And the good news is also that I would say like the European Union came quite well prepared to this appointment with an agreed position to be able to negotiate with the rest of the world on this fossil fuel phase out call. So I think this is important for me to say, because this I just also wanted to share, as being someone that followed already several COP, is the first time that a COP is really having as a focus of this agenda the fossil fuel phase out call. And I think this is important to highlight, because this is also what is also the result of many of us here in this call putting effort forward. But this is also bringing a particular risk, because if we don't deliver on this, I think it will be an enormous disappointment on at many levels that we really would like to avoid, and therefore to go to where we are now. These hours are extremely important. So I'm happy to directly go to what we just received. So for the people that are maybe a little bit less familiar with the UNFCCC negotiations work, we do work on a set of texts. So what we received at the moment is what is called a global stock take text in its last version. And I think also the year is important. I mean, this year COP it represents, after 8 years from the Paris Agreement, a first global stock take on where we are with the implementation of the Paris Agreement goals. And the Paris Agreement goals are extremely clear, and I think it's already an answer if we say that this global stock take as a central pillar the call to phase out fossil fuels. When it comes to the text, we are coming from hours of waiting of a new text. What we had yesterday was a text with several options, with actually a range of options that was going from quite a decent, maybe not as ambitious as civil society is calling for, but quite a decent ambition and clear call for fossil fuel phase out, towards a quite a disastrous ambitious option. Sorry. So what we got now, and I mean, please, I cannot be super precise because I just had a very quick look. But what we got now, unfortunately, is a much shorter text, as was probably foreseen, but that I will define is not a package. We have been speaking about an energy package with the different elements into that will make really the energy transition possible. What we got is more kind of a menu. So a menu where countries can pick and choose. And I think this we cannot accept as a good step forward. Why I'm saying that? I'm saying that because all the items within this paragraph, the call for phase out of fossil fuels and the energy transition transformation, are put forward as options to countries, including the one on tripling renewables and doubling efficiency. But also there is a language that speaks about reducing fossil fuel instead of phasing out. And here, I mean, I just wanted to say that I'm very happy, James, that you came in, because we also saw in the last days absolutely a need to keep referring to science. I mean, the science is telling us that we are at a tipping point, and that this call for phase out for fossil fuels needs to have concrete steps in this decade. And actually, what we are having now in the text that we just received, we have only a 2050 timeline. And this is also, I think, something that we need absolutely to push back, because we want a concrete actions happening and commitment happening in this decade. And then two last points on the text. One of the elements that has been discussed a lot here is also the need for this call for phase out of all fossil fuels to be supported and equipped with what we call in this bubble means of implementation, meaning the support to poor countries to be able to go throughout this transition. And again, like this part of the text is quite weak and not referring enough to the equity principle that is at the heart of the Paris Agreement. And the last point to mention is that we heard a lot in the last days. When we speak about fossil fuel phase out, the more we go in detail, the more there are some false solutions that are trickling down in between the lines. So those are still there, and I think we need to be absolutely clear on what we mean and who needs to do the first step forward. Can I continue or?
Let me get Ricarda in here first with a bit of a political view on what you just said, and what the Ricarda is party chair of the party of Annalena Baerbock, who is as for the non-German viewers here to understand. So Annalena Baerbock is the chief negotiator of Germany here as foreign minister, and Ricarda and Annalena are the same party as is Michael. So here, Ricarda, what do we hear from Dubai, also with the German US, third biggest economy here? What do you think about what Chiara just said, and what are the priorities here from the German side?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, first of all, for the invitation, and thank you for having this webinar, because I think it comes exactly for the right time, because we see that now the COP is going into the decisive phase, and what we are going to do right now is going to decide if this COP is going to be a success or if this COP is going to be a failure when it comes to reaching the Paris Agreement. I was myself in Dubai, I think almost a week ago, so I went right in the beginning. And I mean, the COP started with a sign of hope. So the agreement on the loss and damage fund, and especially the saying of Germany and also the Emirates to say we are going to start and give money to loss and damage for, which then had kind of a chain reaction where other countries, even though I was a little bit disappointed about the US, but many other countries stepped forward and said, well, we're also going to put money into this. I think this was such an important sign for countries that are met most with the consequences of the climate crisis, for the countries of the global south, because I feel, and this feels more and more with every COP I experience, it's so much about trust. It's so much about if Western countries like Germany, if Western countries from the European Union are going to hold up their promises, or if they're going to make promises and then fail to meet them. Oh, sorry, I have a little bit of problem with the light here. I hope you still see me, even though it's not perfect, sorry. Like this, I think it's better. So I think this was a really big sign. Well, we're going to meet our promises. You can trust us, and therefore also to build global partnerships, because it's not just going to work with the partnerships we had in the past. We need new partnerships. We need new alliances, and this will only work if we stand with our responsibility as the most historically the polluters. But since then, I have become more worrisome about the developments on the COP. I mean, we had the sayings of the leader of the COP, Al-Shabaab, last week, where he said there was no link between emissions and fossil fuels, which I don't think within this room I have in any way to explain that this is just utter bullshit. Of course, the question, if we're going to meet the Paris Agreement, is fundamentally linked to the fossil fuel phase out. And as the European Union, also as the German government, we had three main points that we brought with us to the COP. So we said, if we want to meet Paris, we have to do three things. First of all, triple the building of renewable energies worldwide. Secondly, double the energy efficiency until 2030. The first one is also until 2030. And the third one would be the fossil fuel phase out. And as far as I have understood, what I have heard about the text that was just proposed, which I have not in full read, I'm probably more informed about it than me at the moment, we have movement with the renewable energies, with the energy efficiency, which is good, but we don't have the movement when it comes to the fossil fuel phase out. And I think the text as it is proposed at the moment is what the oil and gas industry wants. So it's actually just like mellowing down and being, we need to get to net neutrality and stuff like this. But the past has shown us, and we had a talk about this, for example, with Ottmar Edenhofer, one of the leading scientists here in Germany on climate neutrality, where he said, well, the thinking of if you just build up the renewable energies, the fossil fuels are automatically going to go out of the system has not worked. Of course, you can't phase out the fossil fuels without building the renewables. That's clear. We're going to need the energy, but it's not automatically linked. So I think we have to do both. We have to build renewable energies in a rapid speed. We have to build partnerships on renewable energies, but at the same time, we need to make active political measures to phase out fossil fuels. And so for me, for the last remaining hours of the COP, this is the main goal. I think now it's really the time to show up that we're not just talking about words, but we're really talking about action. It's a time for countries like Germany to stand with this position, to be clear on this position. And it's a time for countries like oil producing, oil exporting countries to see that they also have to adapt to the end of fossil fuels, because this era is going to end. And what we're experiencing right now is trying to prolong this area. We need to combine gas with CCS. We talk about this and this and this, and just trying to keep the end further away. But it's not just really wrong when it comes to climate politics. In my opinion, it's also wrong, because this will lead to fossil fuel fossil lock-ins. If we now keep investing in this infrastructure, even though we know the end has to come at some point if we want to reach Paris, this will lead to wrong investments. This will also be a problem for us economically. So if we want to strengthen the economy, we also have to be kind of planning security, which also would mean have a clear plan on how to phase out fossil fuels with steps. Of course, it's going to be about steps. We as ourselves in Germany are using gas at the moment, but keep this plan and then go by step, build up the renewables. I think giving planning security, giving clear action on climate policy is going to be much more efficient than trying to prolong the era of the fossil fuels.
Excellent, Ricarda. Thank you very much. I just want to now look at the audience question and looking what Chiara just said and others said in the chat. So maybe one of the big, when you followed the kind of discourse about this in the last weeks, abated fossil fuels fade out, and the term of abatement, which in German actually I actually don't know what it translates to. So you basically you take the CO2 off, you still burn, and you take the CO2 off. This is CCS and all those terms. So maybe I get take James in here from what you've heard from Chiara now and from the text. So what is this danger with this abatement? What is this actually about from a scientific point of view? And this is really something that, is it the easy solution? Just, do abatement for all of us and just keep going.
So is that a question for me?
Yes, it is. Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, so unsurprisingly, the text is talking about phasing out unabated things such as coal. This is not a new idea. So in the early 1990s, this expression of clean coal was touted by the fossil fuel industry. And the idea is that you could continue to burn coal, but you would scrub out the carbon dioxide from the chimney. So you'd capture the CO2 using a kind of a chemical absorbent process. So you can continue to burn the coal, and then you capture the carbon, and then you put it underground. Right. So this is an old technology. The oil and gas industry has been using carbon capture since about the 1970s. And what they do, they use carbon captures mainly from fossil gas, mainly from natural gas. As you pump up methane, it comes with a lot of carbon dioxide. They used to just vent that to the atmosphere. What they do now, they separate it out, they concentrate and they pump it down deep underground. They do that in order to force oil out of depleted oil wells. So it's a form of enhanced oil recovery. So they've been doing it for decades. The spin is with abated coal, and also when you see this with blue hydrogen, burning fossil gas to produce hydrogen, you would capture the CO2 from the chimney, and then rather than use it to pump up more oil and gas, you would store it underground in these kind of geological storage systems, probably depleted oil and gas fields, right? The problem is every single carbon capture and storage facility that has been attempted by the fossil fuel industry is always over budget, it underperforms and exposes yet more problems. Perhaps the greatest example we got at the moment is the Gorgon plant run by Chevron in Australia. It's billions of dollars and it just doesn't work anything like as much as we need to. So there's an awful lot of boosterism. There's an awful lot of wild claims about what carbon capture and storage is going to do. And also around the language of net zero by 2050, they are assuming that we're still going to be burning a lot of coal, oil and gas, but either through carbon capture at point source or through technologies such as direct air capture, which is going to be carbon dioxide removal, so taking CO2 directly out of the atmosphere, we can still keep burning fossil fuels. The problem, of course, with carbon dioxide removal is it's wildly expensive. There are pilot projects. It costs hundreds and hundreds of dollars per ton to remove from the atmosphere. There are no credible technologies which is going to remove gigascale carbon dioxide, but they continue to put these into these scenarios and in today's policy announcements, I suppose, because it essentially extends your carbon budget. If they were being honest, what they would say is in the absence of a phase out of fossil fuels, we are saying goodbye to 1.5 and we're probably going to say goodbye to 2 degrees. They won't say that. They are not being honest. Instead, they continue this fiction that we can continue to burn and emit billions of tons of CO2 through the burning of coal, oil and gas and also keep humanity safe. And it's just not true, I would argue.
Thank you, James. Well, Michael, on this actually. So you said, it's better for the European Union to walk out rather than sign up to a bad deal. So is the question of abatement here and the language on that point, is that for you as a European member of the European Parliament and therefore kind of you're not directly involved, but the delegation, you have contact to the delegation. Is that also for the delegation of the European Union a red line here, or is there movement?
So basically, the position of the European Parliament is phasing out of fossil fuels. The position of the European member states, so the Council, is not as clear. It speaks about, if I'm trying to get the language, phasing out of fossils in the energy sector, and achieving a fully or predominantly decarbonized global power system in the 2030s. So that it leaves a little bit room for the abatement. And I mean, here's the thing: we probably will need a tiny little bit of abatement technologies, especially for the industrial sector, especially, for instance, for cement, because there's currently no technological way to produce concrete without CO2 emissions. And I think this is also recognized by the IPCC. But this is something completely different than using CCS to prolong the lifetime of oil and gas energy producing plants, or pretending that this would be a technology that would enable something like clean coal or clean gas. This is just not going to happen. There's no technology available that is allowing this. There's no infrastructure for this. It's vastly expensive. So I think if we in the end have a text that basically says we need to get rid of fossil fuels in the energy sector and in the hard to abate sectors, there's a possibility for abatement. It's okay. But for the rest, not. I think in the end, because that was the other part of your question, the European Union walked away already before. I mean, we do not have to agree to just anything here. Sometimes it's better to say no to something and then start all over again. We have to remember we are in a oil-producing, gas-producing country. It's led by a president who is also the head of the big national oil and gas company. So we do not need to agree to everything what kind of oil and gas interests have to say. What is going to happen now, I think, and I hope, we will negotiate the whole night through, and we will push hard because what is on the table right now is unacceptable. We need language that is clear and according to science, and science is clear. If we want to keep the Paris goals in reach, we have to end fossil fuels. So let's see where we are tomorrow. One thing is for me now clear. I don't think we will be ready by 11 tomorrow morning. Maybe it will take until tomorrow evening. Maybe it will take longer, but we will fight until the end to get a text that keeps the Paris goals in reach.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was actually the top question from Kirsten Elverfeld here in the question. So just that the audience know your questions don't go unnoticed. I just put it in here. So trying to get Chiara back on here now, because you wanted to say something about loss and damage. So what Ricarda also said, like of this sign of hope of those 100, 200 millions. And I think over the days preceding this announcement, more money has actually been committed. But what do you think about that? Is that enough, Chiara, or where do we stand there? As also regarding what Ignacio said, because he clearly said, this doesn't work without the developed countries giving more money.
Yes, thank you for letting me come in on this. And I just wanted to say, I also want to come in on this because everything here is also connected, because we need to remember that the Paris Agreement has the three pillars: mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage. And if those three pillars don't move together, we have a problem because the architecture of the Paris Agreement will only work if those three pillars are advanced together. So I just wanted to maybe clarify, judge a little bit what we saw, because if I may, because we saw indeed a lot of pledges following the decision on the authorization of the fund. And we do welcome and we do support those pledges. But I just wanted to give you some numbers. Basically, the overall support to the loss and damage through the pledges that have been done here amounts to $700 million. Of those 700 million, 300 are coming from the European member states, plus another 100 if we add France that put those 100 million forward, but with some conditionality that other countries will contribute as well. So you see, just to give you a sense that the things are a little bit still unclear. And on top of that, what we have is really in the ocean. If you compare to the scale of the needs that we have with the loss and damage today. So I think what we needed to say, and I would like to see also in the news and in the media, I think we needed to keep encouraging and welcoming such pledges, but also highlighting that the Loss and Damage Fund, if to function as a climate justice fund, needs much more. What we have is only to kick off the fund and not to start granting projects that could address the loss and damage. And then maybe one important point also to highlight is that for the first time, we have a contribution of 100 million from the hosting country, so these hosting countries. And I think this is creating an interesting and powerful precedent in terms of all the discussion that we had, especially at the EU level, on our push to enlarge the donor base in the context of the Paris Agreement.
Thank you very much. So we're going towards the end now, and I still want to take the opportunity actually to look forward here, and actually look forward as well as speak very quickly about if any of the panelists need to leave, just leave. Thank you so much for being here. But maybe I just make that point first. So thank you very much for many of you on short notice be with us for this excellent discussion. I think some of you may have still a couple of more minutes, so we just carry on a bit until everyone is gone. But let me just finish here, and then we basically go into the extension a bit. So thank you. So extending this. So we have many questions from the audience about the presence of lobbyists and the presence of the fossil fuel company at this COP. Historic numbers, 2,400 registration for that. So many people are asking, and now the next COP has been announced for Azerbaijan, which is a massive oil producing country, right? So what is going on there in terms of lobby influence, and how can you explain this and how we go 2,400 lobbyists? So how do we how does it go in the future? And maybe is COP actually the right way to do it? If is it swamped by lobbyists? Maybe Chiara, you're smiling, and Ricarda as well. So maybe actually let me start with Ricarda on that. Also, let me go in you first, and then Chiara.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a question. It's the same for me when I do like Instagram lives or something. I did it for Dubai. That's like the biggest question. I understand it very much. I think the thing is, in some way, you have to work with those countries, of course. You can't let them out. And you also have to work with the industry in some capacity. But the problem is, and I mean, you thought this COP, if you look at how big a space oil and gas companies took in, if you walked there and you were given like brochures and programs where they were like, this is going to look what the oil industry is going to look in 2050. It becomes kind of a greenwashing program. So I think I'm still convinced the COP is the right instrument. And I think Annalena Baerbock said this last year, if the COP would have not been invented in the past, we would have to invent it now. But we have to be clearer. And I also think the United Nations need to be clearer when it comes to rules, especially when it takes place in countries like this. When it comes to human rights, I thought some really bad things in Egypt, especially last year. And also when it comes to the influence of lobbyism, when it comes to the influence of oil industry, etc. And so I think we have to learn and get better when it comes to this. And one last thought, because you were talking about abatement as well. And I mean, we just had this discussion on a German level, and we said that for really not to abate emissions, we are also going to work with CCS. The problem with abatement, and I think with all these discussions on CCS, on CCU, is that in the climate discussion, there's always the search for the wonder solution. So you don't want to do the work. And so there always comes up this one solution that makes everything go away. We have this with CCS, we have this with CCU, we have this in Germany even with like Kernfusion, so nuclear fusion, which is something, there's no scientific evidence that it's going to work in the next, not just years, but so like the next 10, 20, 30 years. So until we need to get climate neutral. And I really think this is something we have to push against. You can use some of the solutions in a very like restricted, limited area, but they're not going to take away the job of going out of fossil fuels, the job of becoming climate neutral. And I think it's many times those wonder solutions are used as excuses. And this is something also the lobby is doing, also the oil industry is doing. And I think we have to also do transparent these excuses, show that they are nothing else but excuses, and they're not going to keep us away from doing the work. I have to leave actually now, but it was really nice meeting you.
Excellent, Ricarda.
Good luck to Dubai. Good caffeine tablets, and
thank you.
Stay strong. Goodbye.
Thank you, Ricarda. Bye. Now, Chiara, maybe on the point of lobbyism again that was mentioned. Yeah, I think you wanted to go in there as well.
Yes, sure. I mean, I agree very much with what has been just said. Maybe also as an information, there is a report that I can share in the chat that is showing that there are more than 2,400 lobbies registered from fossil fuel companies registered in this COP. So as you can imagine, like it's quite a big number. And what is worrying to me personally is that those lobbies are part of government delegations. So I think this is really like unacceptable. I'm also here as a lobbyist, if you want, but I'm here as an observer. I don't take part in party negotiations, and I do my job in terms of sharing where my organization and the constituency I represent the messages that we would like to put forward. So I think this is very important. That is part of the debate, of the public debate. And what we are asking, I do think still that we need this process if we want to advance, because it's the only global process that we have. But there are some things that need to be clarified and regulated better. And one very clear call that we have at Climate Action Network Europe is really a call towards the UN Policy Secretariat to have a much more robust conflict of interest policies, especially when it comes to the agreement with the hosting country. And that I think is super important, because as of 2019, we really saw a trend on shrinking space for civil society and increasing space for lobbies from fossil fuel companies. And at the same time, if you allow me to say, it's also important to highlight that, I mean, if there is such an interest from fossil fuel companies to be here, I think we are tackling the right problem.
Yeah, I mean, many people commented actually also that the letter sent by OPEC basically reeks of desperation a bit, that, you know, a lot of things are changing. James, maybe when you have, when I just want to get you in for another minute and then we actually close here, so not to overdo it. So I think when talking about all of this and talking with our, you know, with people about this and also in the family and now in the next coming days, I think you always get the feeling like, oh my God, another COP that failed, another COP that has been a huge lobby fest, another COP that, you know, went horribly, and, you know, you get really negative feeling. And in your tipping points report, you had the section on positive tipping points, you know, where actually where things actually have maybe reached or will be reaching a point when a positive change is actually tipping over. So I wanted to get you in on this also for people to, you know, maybe go out here with like the sense of, yes, urgency, and, you know, a lot of things are not happening as desperation from the fossil fuel side, but, you know, are there also positive developings in the last 28 COPs?
Yes. Okay. So you want me to be the voice of optimism so we can go and spend the rest of the day and not be completely depressed? I'm happy
No,
to
not completely. You can, you know, can be 90%,
Okay,
95% depressed and 5%, you know, positive about that there is still a way.
You want some hope. I can give you hope,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's going to come in exchange with some reality, right?
Yes,
So
good.
you're
Yes.
going to have to have your medicine or eat your vegetables,
Yes.
and then you can get your pudding and the nice thing to eat, right?
Exactly.
So the good thing is that the COPs do something. They send important signals to finance, to industry, to commercial operators. In terms of which way is the wind blowing, right? And I think it's absolutely the case that everyone now understands that we are going to see the phase out of fossil fuels. It's happening. The energy transition is happening, right? We're seeing exponential deployment of renewables. We're seeing trillions probably of dollars being moved into alternative energy systems, and then all the other things that we would need to do in order to transform our societies to get off of fossil fuels. I absolutely am convinced that this is happening and it will happen. The question, of course, is it happening fast enough? It's not happening fast enough. It's not happening fast enough for 1.5, and it didn't. We are going to exceed 1.5 degrees warming and probably an awful lot more. That's just going to happen. I think that is now just physics, right? There is a budget left, but we're talking what, 5, 6, 7 years, okay, right? So we need a really important dose of reality, because if they refuse to phase out in a equitable and just way, but a rapid way, if COP28 doesn't agree to do that, then COP28 also needs to be seen as the moment when we lost 1.5. So you can have the hope, but we need to have the reality. I think the most hope that comes from the Global Tipping Points report is that it shows us there are numerous examples of social systems, political, economic systems, societies changing incredibly rapidly in ways that we couldn't foresee, that didn't require top-down control, didn't require world government. Then there are all these potential leverage points, intervention points where societies can fundamentally switch, right? We're talking very, very quickly. The example of electric vehicles is used in Norway because it's, I can see why that's quite popular and interesting, but I'm much more interested in what societies can do in terms of attitudes, behaviors, ways they might want to think about consuming energy use. So we know we can do it. What the IPCC, I think, needs to do, and what the next COP needs to do, is be really much more ambitious on how fast societies can change. And that includes societies of which I'm a member, Germany, United Kingdom, rich, industrialized nations most responsible for the climate crisis, but most able to do something about it. I think our potential to undertake change is much, much greater than many envoys and politicians and industrial leaders would ever like us to think, right? It serves as a brake on how fast we can act. We can act much, much faster. And if we were to act much faster, then yes, we could get nearer to the Paris Agreement.
Thank you. That was pretty good medicine in both directions. Thank you. And I will just give Michael, maybe you want to add something to this. I find it was quite a good closing statement, but maybe, coming from Dubai, since we are live in Dubai, you may have another minute or so, and then we are closing. Maybe your view, and one of the questions was, what can citizens actually do now? So, the last 2 days, should we ring our parliamentarians? Should we, what can people do to make this a success? Or is it about making the COP a next success of this COP? wouldn't?
Well, maybe to just qualify this a little bit. Of course, it is really good that we have the Paris Agreement. We parliamentarians were able to, for instance, put in law a climate law on the European level that then is really implemented into policies. And we basically, what we said always was, look, we have the COP agreement. This is what we ought to do, and now we build on it. We have a scientific council on the European level, which we asked to compute a CO2 budget for the European Union, and here as well we are referring to the global processes and our European responsibility. So in this way, it is actually helping us, but of course it's much too slow. I think the elephant in the room is that well, Schellenhuber said it so nicely and dramatically. At the 3-degree hotter Earth, this is the end of human civilization. Why? Because that would mean that in a big part of our planet, you would only survive around 3 hours outside because it would be too hot and too humid. And this is what you're just, the physics of our body cannot survive there. That would mean 1.3 billion people would have to leave their home. And I think we as a society, as a global society, will not be able to survive this. Currently, with all of the pledges, everything that has been already put into NDCs, not yet implemented, the UN tells us we are on a 2.9 degree pathway. So that's basically a pathway to the end of our civilization. So what we need to discuss next time is updating our climate objectives, updating our climate policy so that we go in the direction of below 2 degrees. And we have been discussing this in 2 years ago. We have been discussing this last year. And every time the language is, until next year, all of the member states should increase their climate policies so that we will be collectively getting to below 2 degrees. Nothing is happening. So what really needs to be the point of next year's COP is that we increase our NDCs, our climate policies, that we collectively get into the direction of 2 degrees, and eventually that is what it means, save the human civilization. Yeah, I mean, this is what it's all about, and we should not forget about it. So therefore we will fight tonight. Let's see what is coming out tomorrow. But in the end, it's not in the COP where things are happening. Things are happening on the ground. And most of the time it's the society that is actually pushing us and implementing things and showing that things are possible. So therefore we need you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you very much, James. Thank you very much, Chiara. Everyone who has been here, more than 1,000 people over this webinar cumulatively. So that was really great. Just want to, before we close, invite you to our COP28 analysis webinar on Thursday at 6 p.m. where we'll have Niklas Höhne from New Climate Institute and others really looking at the text. Hopefully we will have a text by then on Thursday and really see what was the end of this, and maybe also refer to our discussion, which I found really excellent. Thank you very much for all your questions, for all your time, and see you at the next Europe Calling, and all the best to all of us, essentially.
Yeah, thank you to all the guests that it worked. It was very well, it was a coordination effort, and I think everyone was very flexible. So thanks a lot that this was happening.
And thank you to Charlotte and your team. Excellent work.
Yeah.
Bye everyone.